Why did they laugh when she stopped running? Maybe because it was easy. Easy to mock the quiet girl who rarely spoke above a whisper. Easy to believe she didn't belong here. The sun at Fort Bradley burned down on the field, heating the dirt until it shimmered like glass. 48 recruits stood in formation, their breaths shallow, their nerves wound tight. Today wasn't just another drill. It was the day the instructors had promised would strip away illusions, the day that separated the wheat from the chaff. Shaw tied her worn running shoes for the third time, her fingers trembling despite her effort to appear calm. She felt the rough fabric of her PT uniform clinging to her skin, damp from a night of sleepless turning. Every sound was sharp, the click of boots, the nervous chatter around her, the scrape of gravel under shifting feet. She looked small in the crowd, quiet in a place where noise was power. Wasn't quiet, he never was. His voice carried like a challenge across the group. "Try to keep up today, Shaw," he said, bouncing on his toes with that swagger he wore like armor. "Some of us actually plan on making it through." The recruits around him laughed moths to a flame, lowered her eyes, not because she was weak, because silence was safer. She whispered back, almost inaudible, "I'll do my best." They chuckled louder. She could feel their eyes on her, branding her as less than, as fragile. She spent 6 weeks like this, avoiding attention, moving like a ghost, letting the noise pass over her. Because attention, she knew, was dangerous. Then Sergeant Martinez appeared. The laughter died instantly. Martinez didn't need to shout for silence. His presence carried weight. His face was carved by 2 decades of service. His voice, when it broke the air, felt like iron. Today's exercise is simple in concept, brutal in execution. He let the words sink in. 12 miles, varied terrain, hills, streams, obstacles. The first 20 across the line get a weekend pass. The last 10 toothbrushes, latrines, all weekend. A low ripple of groans. Martinez's eyes swept them like a hawk's. When they landed on, they lingered a fraction too long. "But here's the twist," he continued, packing like a predator. "At intervals you will face scenarios, soldiers in distress, decisions to make, and know this, your choices will be noted, because a soldier who abandons his comrades," his voice dropped to a growl, "is no soldier at all." The silence that followed pressed heavy. When the order came, "Move out," the recruits surged forward, a human wave crashing into the dirt, hung back, letting them fight for position. She had no interest in glory. She wanted rhythm, pace, distance. She wanted to disappear inside the sound of her own breathing. The first mile passed in dust and sweat. Ran at the front, legs pumping like pistons, his confidence glowing for all to see. Jennifer wasn't far behind, her stride measured, efficient, the stride of a woman who'd run for medals before she'd ever worn a uniform. Kept to the middle, steady, invisible. Her lungs drew in air, slow and calm. She knew endurance wasn't just muscle, it was mind. It was the discipline to keep moving when the world told you to stop. At mile 3, the forest swallowed them. The air cooled. Shadows stretched across the trail. That's where they found the first scenario, a body in fatigues lying motionless by the path. Some slowed, most didn't, glanced once then kept running. His pace mattered more than the man on the ground. Hesitated, but her group pressed her forward. Only one recruit stopped, tall and broad, peeling away from the pack to kneel by the figure. Stopped too. Something about the placement felt wrong, too deliberate. She crouched beside the body. It wasn't real, not fully. A training dummy weighted and shaped to simulate injury. But the positioning told a story. If this had been real, the casualty's airway would have been compromised. His body needed to be shifted with care, transported with technique. Her hands moved without thought. Precision in each grip, each adjustment. Not the clumsy motions taught in first aid class, something sharper, older, like memory, like reflex. Other recruits gathered, uncertain, watching as slid the figure into a carry position, hoisted it onto her shoulders and rose without strain. Her body remembered every detail. She walked forward steady until the evaluators waved her on. Eyes followed her as she ran again, the ghost suddenly visible. Whispers trailed her. Where'd she learn that? She ignored them, focused on the dirt beneath her shoes, the breath in her lungs. But inside she felt the knot of tension tighten. She'd revealed too much. The course grew with each mile. Hills tore at thighs, streams chilled ankles, obstacles scraped palms and knees. Some recruits dropped out, collected by medics in shadowing trucks. Martinez watched from checkpoints, his expression unreadable, his eyes calculating. By mile 7, smoke filled the trail. The rattle of gunfire echoed from speakers hidden in the trees. A simulated combat zone. Wire to crawl under, explosions to ignore, chaos designed to test nerves. Struggled here. His size slowed him. His pride made him clumsy. Moved through like water, her body weaving and sliding as if the obstacles bent away from her. She drew no attention to herself, but recruits noticed. They always noticed. David, running nearby, finally asked between ragged breaths, "Where'd you learn to move like that?" She gave him nothing, just picked it up along the way. He didn't believe it, but before he could press, the scenario changed. Sergeant was down. Not a dummy, not staged, a man. Their instructor, his massive frame sprawled across the dirt, his chest rising shallow, his skin flushed. Real, too real. Recruits clustered, uncertain. Froze, eyes darting toward the finish line, then forward again. He hesitated, then ran on. Stopped, her group argued, torn between loyalty and ambition. Some stayed, some left. No one knew what to do. And then stepped forward. She didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. She slid under his bulk, lifted, and with a smooth fireman's carry rose to her feet, 200 pounds across her shoulders, her body steady, her face calm. "I've got him," she said simply. Gasps spread like wind through the group. Stammered, "Are you sure? It's still 3 miles. He needs medical attention. This is the fastest way." And she began to walk. Each step deliberate, strong, relentless. Gravel shifted beneath her boots, streams waited ahead, obstacles loomed. But she didn't falter. Other recruits fell in behind her, forming an impromptu unit. Some from respect, some from disbelief, some because they didn't know what else to do but follow the quiet girl carrying a giant on her shoulders. Reappeared, shame flickering behind his eyes. "Jesus, Shaw, where'd you learn?" She cut him off softly, "Just something you pick up." Her stride never broke. The group moved like a column at its center, carrying the weight of a man and the weight of every watching eye. Each obstacle loomed like a test, each mile like an accusation. And still she went on, her breathing steady, her face unreadable, her secret buried beneath layers of silence. What none of them knew was this: it wasn't the hardest thing she'd ever carried, not even close. Why didn't she slow down? That was the question burning in every recruit's mind as Shaw carried Sergeant over her shoulders. 200 pounds of unconscious weight pressing down on her spine, her arms braced, her breath measured. Others tried to help, but she waved them off gently, not out of pride, but out of precision. The balance was exact. One wrong shift and both of them would collapse. The trail ahead twisted into uneven ground. Roots reached like claws across the dirt. The slope tilted upward, cruel in its timing, adjusted her step, her body moving with a rhythm that seemed impossible under the burden she carried. Some recruits whispered in awe, some whispered in suspicion, because it didn't look like desperation, it didn't look like luck, it looked like training. Jennifer jogged beside her, sweat dripping down her jaw, her voice low. "You've done this before, haven't you?" His eyes stayed forward. "We all have things in our past that prepare us." It wasn't an answer, but it was enough to keep thinking long after. The 9th mile tested them with water. A shallow stream, slippery rocks, cold water lapping at boots. Recruits stumbled, cursed, clutched at branches for balance. Entered last, still slung across her shoulders. Her boots pressed against stone, testing each step before committing her full weight. Slow, deliberate, she crossed clean. A gasp went up. Some clapped, then caught themselves, realizing applause had no place here. But the awe was there, unspoken. Fell back into stride beside her, his earlier arrogance replaced by something new, uneasy respect. He muttered half to himself, "Nobody just does this, not without training." His voice was steady but soft. "Focus on the finish." The finish, 3 more miles, a rope climb, a wall, terrain that broke even the strongest runners. For each obstacle was a puzzle. She tied against her back for the rope, scaling upward with hands free, movements clean. At the wall, she coordinated recruits into a system, 2 lifting from below, 1 pulling from above. She gave orders like someone who had led teams before, and they obeyed without question. It was who finally spoke the truth aloud. "That's not basic training, that's muscle memory." Only replied, "The mission comes first, people matter most." No bravado, no explanation, just principle. By the 11th mile, his breathing had stabilized under her constant adjustments. But the terrain grew, jagged rock and steep incline. Some recruits begged to wait for a rescue truck. Shook her head. "He needs the medics at the checkpoint. Waiting isn't an option." And they kept moving. When they reached the checkpoint, paramedics rushed forward. They were stunned not only by her speed but by the fact that his airway had been maintained, his vitals stable. One medic asked the question on everyone's mind. "Who taught you to monitor vitals like that?" His only answer, silence. She sat on a rock as the medics loaded into the helicopter. Her shoulders sagged at last, her body showing the weight she had carried, both physical and invisible. Around her, recruits stared with something new. Not mockery, not doubt, respect. Whispered, "Extraordinary." Even once her loudest critic managed. "Most badass thing I've ever seen." When they crossed the final mile together, recruits who had once laughed at her now clustered around her like a formation. They didn't plan it, they just did it. And that's when Captain Williams appeared. He was waiting at the finish line, his expression unreadable, his voice formal. "Private Shaw, I understand you carried Sergeant for 3 miles. I'd like to speak with you privately." His words carried weight disguised as routine, an invitation that was also a summons. Only nodded, calm, as if she'd been expecting it. That night, whispers filled the barracks. Stories spread like wildfire. The girl who carried a sergeant 3 miles without breaking stride. Recruits from other platoons lingered, trying to catch a glimpse of her. Endured it quietly, but inside she felt the danger growing. Visibility had always been the enemy of security, and she had just become impossible to ignore. When the summons came, she entered Captain Williams's office with perfect composure. The room was plain, photos on the desk, scars of long service on the man himself. He studied her like a puzzle. "What you did today," he said, "was remarkable, not just strength, not just endurance, technique, textbook combat extraction. Where did you learn that?" His eyes stayed steady. "Just trying to be the best soldier I can, sir." The words were both true and incomplete. Williams leaned forward, his voice measured. "Your file says you came straight from Nebraska, retail clerk, no prior training, no specialized background. Yet today you carried a 200-pound man 3 miles, monitoring his vitals, coordinating a team. These are skills we see in elite units, not basic training recruits." Silence. Then he slid a manila folder across the desk. It was thicker than any recruit's file had a right to be. "This contains records that shouldn't exist, training evaluations from units that don't admit recruits, recommendations from officers whose names are classified. So I'll ask you directly, who are you really, Shaw?" The air felt heavier. His voice, when it came, was calm. "Sir, extreme circumstances bring out capabilities people don't know they have. Today was just doing what needed to be done." William studied her. He smiled faintly. not amusement, recognition. That's the kind of answer I'd expect from someone trained in operational security. He tapped the folder. Because this says you're exactly the kind of soldier we need for something beyond basic training. His heartbeat quickened, though her face gave nothing away. His words painted the shadow of a mission, something waiting beyond Fort Bradley, something designed for someone like her. She said carefully, assuming for the sake of argument you're right, what kind of mission? Williams leaned back, eyes sharp. The kind where you carry more than just a man on your shoulders, the kind where you carry the weight of silence, secrets, and lives. Held his gaze, and for the first time allowed herself a single thought. Maybe her cover hadn't just been blown. Maybe this had been the plan all along. Why didn't she deny it more forcefully? That was the question asked herself later that night as she lay awake in the barracks, listening to the hum of whispers drifting through the bunks. Some recruits gossiped in awe, some in disbelief, but all of them spoke about Shaw. Herself lay still, eyes closed, body calm, but her mind was anything but. She had been careful for 6 weeks, careful to move like a ghost, careful to remain invisible. And then one choice, one unconscious man, one act of necessity, and now every eye at Fort Bradley was fixed on her. She had told herself it didn't matter. That operational cover was flexible. That exposure could be managed. But the truth was heavier than even on her shoulders. The mission wasn't supposed to start here. And yet, it already had. Morning formation came. Sergeant Martinez's voice cut across the field, iron sharp as always. But his eyes lingered on longer than usual. Too long. Yesterday, he said to the platoon, revealed who you are. Some of you chose yourselves. Some chose the mission. And one of you chose to carry a man when every step said you couldn't. The recruits glanced at, though none dared whisper. Martinez's expression remained unreadable, but his next words cut through the air like a blade. Private Shaw, your actions the highest traditions of this uniform. You placed a comrade above yourself. That is what soldiers do. Public recognition, a gift and a curse. Muttered behind her, not cruel this time, but with reluctant admiration. Guess we all underestimated Nebraska. Size stayed sharper, more calculating. The day's training was relentless. Obstacle courses, endurance sprints, weapons drills, but wherever went, eyes followed. Recruits sought her advice on knots, navigation, technique. She gave it quietly, efficiently, always trying to dim the glow that now burned around her. But wasn't letting go. During a rest period, she cornered with a bluntness that belonged more to officers than recruits. The way you carried, the way you monitored him, that wasn't improvisation. That was training, specialized training. Took a sip from her canteen, her face calm. People are stronger than they think when they don't have a choice. Leaned in, lowering her voice. Maybe, but I've been around elite athletes my whole life. I know the difference between raw instinct and practiced memory. You didn't hesitate. You moved like you'd done it 100 times, and I think you're hiding something. For a moment almost smiled. Wasn't wrong, she was just too close to the truth. I think, said softly, you see more than most, but sometimes reading too much into things can be dangerous. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning, and knew the difference. That night tried to lose herself in routine, showering, folding uniforms, polishing boots. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Captain Williams's folder. Thick, heavy, full of things no one was supposed to know. She thought of the line he had given her. The kind of mission where you carry the weight of silence, secrets, and lives. And she wondered, not for the first time, if collapse had been real at all. The thought gnawed at her. Days passed, training intensifying as the platoon neared the final phase of basic. Night navigation, land exercises, patrol simulations with instructors acting as aggressors, and every step of the way walked a tightrope between invisibility and the respect she couldn't deflect. During one night exercise, she was paired with recovered, grateful, and David, who still hadn't stopped asking quiet questions. They were to move by compass and starlight, reaching checkpoints without being detected by Martinez's roving patrols. The forest was thick with silence, only the crunch of boots and the soft whisper of leaves overhead. "I want to thank you again," said quietly as they moved. His voice carried the weight of sincerity. "The doctors told me, if you hadn't gotten me to medics as fast as you did, things could have gone very differently. You saved my life, Shaw. I won't forget it." His reply was simple. Any soldier would done the same. But even struggling to keep pace shook his head. "No, most of us would wanted to, but we wouldn't have known how, or we wouldn't have been strong enough, or both." His words hung in the dark like a truth no one wanted to admit. They reached each checkpoint with flawless precision. His map reading was perfect, her sense of direction uncanny. She led them down routes that skirted danger, slipping past patrols without sound. At dawn, when they finished ahead of schedule, gave her a look that was more than gratitude. It was recognition. "You've done this before," he said softly. Didn't answer. The next week brought another exercise. Larger, more complex, a simulated rescue mission. Their team was tasked with extracting survivors from behind enemy lines. Navigating, carrying casualties, securing perimeter, evading pursuit. It was the most realistic scenario yet. When the team gathered, Martinez announced the leader, Shaw. A ripple ran through the recruits. Some expected, but no one argued, not after what they'd seen. Didn't hesitate. She gave assignments, her tone calm, authoritative, and on perimeter, assisting her with casualties, others gathering intelligence. And when things went wrong, as they always did, her voice cut through the chaos like a compass in fog. Orders crisp, decisions sharp, calm under pressure that felt like memory, not instinct. By the end, when they returned with every casualty accounted for, the evaluators nodded. Professional approval, but beneath it something else. Something watching her more closely than the others. That night Captain Williams found her again, not with a summons this time, just a glance across the training ground, a nod that spoke volumes. The kind of nod that meant, it's almost time. Sat on her bunk later, staring at the floor, her body weary, her muscles aching. But her mind was alive, restless, because she knew something and didn't. The mission wasn't waiting after basic. It had already begun. Why had Captain Williams chosen her? The question looped in his mind as she stood at morning formation, the weight of the coming days pressing down heavier than any rucksack she'd carried. His words echoed still. "You're exactly the kind of soldier we need." But what did we mean, and who was watching? The platoon looked different now. The laughter that once cut her down was gone. In its place, respect, curiosity, even fear. Recruits who barely noticed her before now angled toward her in drills, waiting for her example. No longer smirked, no longer competed, no longer asked idle questions. He studied her as if every move carried an answer. Didn't want their attention, but she carried it like she carried, steady, controlled, without complaint. That day's exercise was brutal by design. Simulated combat patrol across miles of rough terrain. Heat rising from the earth, rifles biting into shoulders, Martinez shadowing them like a hawk waiting to strike. The first hour passed with discipline. Teams moved as instructed, but Martinez never made anything that simple. An explosion shattered the silence, smoke grenades, crackling gunfire from hidden speakers. Instructors posing as aggressors burst from the tree line. Chaos. Some recruits panicked, some fired blanks wildly, others froze. She dropped low, scanning, issuing orders in a voice that was firm but never frantic. "Left flank cover, push the rear, with me get the casualty." They moved, not because they had to, because they trusted her. The casualty was a mannequin this time, limbs twisted, meant to test their ability to improvise under pressure. Fumbled with the straps of the litter, his hands shaking. Steadied him with a look, calm enough to cut through the panic. Breathe, one step at a time. Together they lifted, moved, covered ground under fire. When Martinez finally called ceasefire, the recruits lay sprawled in exhaustion, chests heaving, dirt and sweat coating every inch of them. But their casualty was intact. Their formation had held. Martinez's eyes swept them, sharp as glass. Not bad. Some of you might even survive longer than 10 minutes in the real thing. His gaze locked on for a second too long. Then he moved on. Later in the barracks, the whispers started again. Approached while cleaned her rifle, her voice low enough to be drowned by the clatter of others nearby. You led that patrol like you've done it before. That wasn't guesswork. That was doctrine. His hands never paused in their motions. Doctrines printed in every manual. You just have to read carefully. Tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Maybe, but manuals don't put calm in your voice when rounds are cracking overhead. That's not learned in 6 weeks. That's lived. Looked up. For the briefest moment, their eyes locked, two women who knew the language of discipline, though only one of them knew the weight of secrets. Before could press further, Martinez strode through the barracks like a storm. His voice carried authority that silenced even laughter. Night exercise, full kit, 15 minutes. Groans rose, but no one dared resist. The night was heavy with humidity, stars faint behind drifting clouds. The recruits moved in staggered formation, compasses glowing faintly, maps clutched tight. Their task: navigate to checkpoints, avoid patrols, return before dawn. By midnight, exhaustion gnawed at them. Cursed under his breath drove her team with iron efficiency, stumbled but kept moving. And she walked point like a ghost, steps silent, eyes always calculating. Halfway through, they encountered another team, lost, disoriented, panic setting in. Their leader, Foster, flushed with embarrassment, admitted they'd miscalculated bearings. "Shaw," he said awkwardly, "we're turned around, could you?" It was hard for him to ask, harder still to admit weakness. Took the map, her finger tracing the routes quickly, pinpointing the errors. "You corrected too far east. You've been doubling back on yourselves. Here," she drew a line, handed it back. "Follow this ridge. It'll carry you to the checkpoint." Foster swallowed his pride. "Thanks," his voice cracked with sincerity. "Guess I owe you one." It wasn't just gratitude, it was shift. Respect given where once there was doubt. By dawn, both teams arrived at the final checkpoint, undetected, objectives complete. Martinez waited there, arms crossed. His gaze lingered on again. This time, there was something in his eyes that looked less like suspicion and more like calculation. "Some of you," he said, voice low, "show promise. Some of you might even be worth more than the uniform you're wearing. Time will tell." He dismissed them, but knew his words weren't for the group. They were for her. Later that day, Captain Williams summoned her again. His office the same, plain, functional. His eyes anything but. "Your performance hasn't gone unnoticed," he said. "In fact, it's gone exactly as expected." Expected, the word stuck like a thorn. Sat still, careful. "What do you mean, sir?" Williams leaned back, studying her. "Collapse. That wasn't an accident, it was a scenario, a test, one designed for you." The air seemed to freeze. He continued, voice measured. "You were placed here for observation. 6 weeks of watching, waiting, evaluating. Yesterday wasn't about health, it was about you, and you passed." His jaw tightened, though she kept her expression neutral. Inside, her thoughts burned. If that was true, then her cover had never been cover at all. Williams slid the thick folder across the desk again. "Your training, your history, your evaluations. Someone thought it necessary to bury these under layers of clearance. But the truth is simple. You're an asset, and assets aren't wasted." She met his gaze. "So what happens now?" He smiled, faint but sharp. Now, you finish basic training like everyone else. Quiet, competent, forgettable. But when graduation comes, you'll be pulled for something else. He leaned forward, his tone dropping. Something that requires silence, precision, and the ability to carry more than anyone thinks you can. Said nothing, she didn't need to, both of them understood. When she left the office, the night air wrapped around her. The barracks buzzed faintly with tired recruits, laughter, complaints. She walked past them all, her expression calm, her pace steady. Inside, though, she knew the truth. The mission hadn't started with collapse. It hadn't even started when she first set foot on Fort Bradley soil. It had started the day she chose to become someone else. And now, that someone else was almost ready to be called into the shadows. Why was she still pretending? The recruits didn't say it out loud, but it was written on their faces. Every time spoke, they listened. Every time she acted, they followed. Yet she still carried herself like a shadow, soft-spoken, deferential, brushing off praise as if it might burn her. Especially saw it. She studied the way an analyst studies patterns, knowing that repetition meant truth, and truth meant answers. By now, every recruit knew what had happened with. Stories spread faster than fire. Shaw carrying 200 pounds across 3 miles. Shaw crossing streams without breaking stride. Shaw scaling a rope with a man tied to her back. Even the embellishments sounded believable because the reality was already legend. But legends drew attention, and attention was danger. The days tightened as training neared its climax. Martinez drove them harder, pushing them past exhaustion into that raw place where instinct replaced thought. Runs bled into drills, drills into combat simulations, simulations into midnight alerts that left recruits staggering into formation with eyes still half shut. Never faltered, not because it was easy, but because breaking wasn't an option. One evening, the platoon faced a full-field scenario, simulated rescue behind enemy lines, the kind of exercise that demanded every skill they'd been sharpening: navigation, tactics, medical aid, teamwork. When Martinez read the assignment roster, no one was surprised when his name fell as team leader. Muttered under his breath, not in protest but in acceptance, "Figures." Gave assignments quickly, her tone crisp but calm, and on perimeter security, with her on casualty care. Others tasked to intel and movement. The exercise unfolded like a storm. Smoke grenades, scattered blanks, hidden aggressors pressing them from all sides. The crash site was chaos, multiple survivors, some walking, others bleeding and immobile. Knelt by the first injured, her hands steady, movements efficient. She didn't just check vitals. She monitored, adjusted, stabilized, stared, almost forgetting his own role. "Where'd you learn this?" he asked. Didn't look up, focus on the tourniquet. When enemy fire crackled closer, she snapped orders without hesitation. "Push left, hold the rear, we move on my call." The recruits responded like gears in a machine, not perfect, but better than they'd ever been. They extracted every casualty. They fought their way out, coordinated, covered. And when Martinez finally called cease, even the evaluators murmured. This wasn't basic training performance. This was something sharper. Back at the barracks, the talk swelled again. Approached, awkward, his arrogance replaced by sincerity. "I was wrong about you," he admitted, voice low. "I thought strength was loud, turns out it's something else. You showed me that." Gave him a small nod. "We all learned, that's why we're here." But was less easily satisfied. Later, as the barracks quieted, she cornered with the bluntness only truth-seekers carried. "You've done this before," she said, her tone firm. "The way you handle chaos, the way you command, that's not instinct. That's years of training. You can deny it, but I know what I saw." Held her gaze, silent for a moment, then, "We all have pasts that shape us. Some of them just don't fit on paperwork." Studied her, then nodded slowly. It wasn't an answer, but it wasn't a denial either. Days bled into nights and the pressure grew. The final week of training loomed, and with it, graduation. But not all eyes on were friendly. Martinez watched her with something different now. Not suspicion alone, something colder, a measuring gaze, as if weighing her against standards he wouldn't name aloud. One evening, after a grueling obstacle course, he called her aside. "You think carrying made you a hero?" His voice was sharp, cutting. "No, drill sergeant." Her tone was flat, respectful. "Good, because heroes get people killed. Soldiers follow orders, soldiers blend. And you," he stepped closer, eyes narrowing, "you stand out." His jaw tightened. She said nothing. Martinez studied her a moment longer, then turned away, dismissed. His words weren't just warning, they were test. That night she lay awake on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, muscles aching, the barracks filled with the soft chorus of exhausted sleep. Her mind went back to Captain Williams, to the folder, to the admission that collapse had been staged. "You were placed here for observation." The truth dug at her. The mission wasn't waiting at the end. It was alive now, shaping itself around her, testing her silence as much as her strength. And if was right, if others were piecing it together, then the danger wasn't just in failure. It was in exposure. The next morning brought no relief. Another trial waited. Navigation under pressure, timed, with aggressors stalking them through the woods. His team moved like they had before, quiet, efficient, following her lead. But halfway through, they stumbled on Foster's team, lost again, panic sharp in their eyes. Shaw, Foster admitted reluctantly, were turned around, again. His pride burned, but desperation smothered it. Knelt, scanning his map quickly. "You corrected too far west this time, you're chasing shadows. Here," she traced with her finger, calm, certain. "Follow this ravine. It'll cover your movement. You'll hit your checkpoint clean." Foster exhaled, his embarrassment fatting into something else. "Thanks, I owe you more than one now." Her answer was quiet. "We all finish stronger if we finish together." When dawn came, both teams arrived intact. Martinez was waiting. He didn't praise, he didn't scold. He just looked at, long enough for her to understand. Every move she made was already part of a larger judgment. That evening, Captain Williams summoned her again. His voice was calm, his words sharp. "You've proven yourself beyond expectation," he said. "Your leadership, your silence, your restraint, but the final phase is coming, and with it, your future." Stood at attention, her expression unreadable. "Yes, sir." Williams leaned back, eyes steady. "Stay the course. Finish like any other recruit. But know this, the day you graduate will not be the end of your story. It will be the beginning." When she left his office, the night pressed down heavy. She walked past the barracks, past the glow of cigarettes and quiet laughter, until she stood alone under the stars. For the first time in weeks, she let herself whisper into the dark. "What happens when they stop testing and start using me?" The silence gave no answer. But deep inside already knew. Why did graduation feel less like an ending and more like a countdown? The recruits around buzzed with nervous energy, marking the days until family visits, until ceremonies, until they could wear the uniform with pride. They had bruises, scars, inside jokes born from exhaustion. They were about to step into the world as soldiers. But she couldn't shake the weight pressing harder with each sunrise. Captain Williams's words gnawed at her. "The day you graduate will not be the end of your story. It will be the beginning." The final week of training was designed to break even the strongest. 20-mile ruck march, stress fire drills, simulated ambushes, every exercise stacked on the next, leaving bodies wrecked and minds tested. Joked less now, watched more, pushed himself harder, chasing something he couldn't name, and through it all carried her silence like armor. On the second night of that final week, Martinez gave them their task yet. The endurance march, 20 miles, full packs, midnight start. The air was sharp with cold as they set out, boots crunching gravel, packs digging into shoulders. The moon cut shadows across the field. Whispered, "This is the one that breaks people." Said nothing, she knew he was right. Hours dragged, muscles screamed, blisters tore open. Some recruits staggered, fighting tears. The silence was broken only by ragged breaths, the occasional curse. By mile 15, 2 recruits had dropped, loaded onto trucks by medics. By mile 18, a third collapsed, sobbing, unable to stand. Kept moving. Her pace never wavered, her breath steady. She wasn't immune to pain, her body burned, her shoulders ached, every step carried fire, but she carried it differently. Not as punishment, as proof. Struggled beside her, his pack sliding, his face pale. She adjusted his straps without a word, steadying him, sharing a fraction of his weight until he could stand again. "Why are you helping me?" he asked through gasps. "Because we don't leave people behind," she said simply. The words hit him harder than the weight of his pack. When dawn broke and the finish line appeared, fewer than half the platoon crossed together. Some limped, some barely breathed, but they crossed, and at the center was her stride as steady as the first mile. Martinez waited, his face unreadable, his voice as always iron. Pain reveals truth, weakness strips away masks, and sometimes what remains, his eyes landed on, is what we expected. He dismissed them, but the look in his eyes lingered long after. Later, as recruits collapsed into bunks, sat apart, tying and retying her laces, her mind racing. She remembered another march, not at Fort Bradley, years earlier. Different boots, different orders, different faces she couldn't forget no matter how hard she tried. She shook the thought away. She couldn't afford memory now. The days that followed blurred, stress shoots, last inspections, final evaluations. And then, at last, graduation. The parade ground gleamed under the morning sun. Families filled bleachers, waving flags, cameras flashing. Recruits stood in formation, uniforms crisp, boots polished until they reflected the sky. Martinez delivered the address, hard, sharp, but with pride buried in the words. He named their struggles, their growth, their survival. And when he spoke of those who carried others when it would have been easier to walk away, every head turned toward. She kept her eyes forward, her expression neutral. When the ceremony ended, families rushed forward, tears, laughter, embraces. Parents clutched him like he was already a hero. Siblings shouted her name with pride. His mother cried into his shoulder. Stood alone. No family waited for her. No friends outside the formation. She expected nothing else. But someone was waiting. Captain Williams stood at the edge of the field, hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp. When the crowd thinned, he stepped forward. "Walk with me," he said. They moved away from the noise, past the bleachers, toward the quiet edge of the base. "You did well," Williams said. His voice was low, measured. "Better than anyone expected, but now comes the choice." His jaw tightened. What choice? He studied her. "You can take the path you've earned today. Finish here, move into a standard unit, serve like any other soldier. Honor, duty, sacrifice, a good life. Or," he paused, his gaze steady, "you can step into something different, something hidden. Something that will never be acknowledged in ceremonies or speeches, but something that matters more than most will ever know." Her heart beat harder though her face remained calm. "And if I say no?" Williams smiled faintly. "Then you'll serve with honor, and the world will never know what it lost." Silence stretched between them. The wind moved across the field, carrying faint echoes of families still celebrating. Asked softly, "And if I say yes?" His answer was simple. "Then you'll carry the weight you were born to carry, the kind no one else can." She looked past him toward the horizon, toward the lives she might have had, toward the memories she could never escape. Then back at him, "When?" Williams's eyes sharpened. "Now." That night, she didn't return to the barracks. While the other recruits celebrated with families, shared meals, laughed and cried, walked with Williams into the shadows of the base. He led her to a hangar, unmarked, guarded, quiet. Inside, dim lights revealed a small group of soldiers already waiting. Not recruits, not regulars. Men and women with eyes that had seen too much, uniforms stripped of identifying marks. Williams gestured toward them. This is where the path begins. One of the operators, a woman with close-cropped hair and a scar tracing her jaw, studied with an appraising look. She doesn't look like much. Met her gaze evenly. Neither does silence until you hear it. The woman almost smiled, almost. Williams spoke again. Your first assignment won't be glory, it won't even be combat, it will be observation, patience. You'll see things others don't, and you'll learn to carry them without breaking. Nodded once, I understand. But inside she knew the truth. She had been carrying long before today. And now the wait was only beginning. Why did they trust her with silence before anything else? Because silence reveals more than sound ever could. The hangar that night smelled of oil and metal, the air heavy with the hum of fluorescent lights. Stood among strangers, operators whose faces carried lines deeper than their years, whose eyes scanned every corner as if danger hid in shadows. No one offered handshakes. No one asked her name. In this place, names were currency too costly to spend. Captain Williams briefed them quickly. Observation detail, non-permissive environment, no insignia, no acknowledgement. You'll move quiet, blend, record, nothing more. The success of this mission will be measured by what doesn't happen. He looked at when he said it. Her assignment was simple in theory. Accompany 2 operators on a low-profile reconnaissance overseas. No uniform, civilian clothes, eyes open, mouth closed. But simplicity is a mask. Underneath it, truth waited sharp and unforgiving. Within 48 hours, she was gone from Fort Bradley. No ceremony, no farewell. Just a silent departure into an aircraft that carried no markings. The city they landed in pulsed with life, markets crowded with shouts, the air thick with spice and exhaust, shadows where eyes lingered too long. Wore jeans, a plain shirt, her hair tucked beneath a cap. Invisible, yet alert. Her cover was simple, a tourist. Her task anything but. She walked streets beside the woman from the hangar, call sign Vega, and a quiet man named, whose silence was heavier than hers. Together they blended, though each step carried intent. Their job, watch a single building. Apartment block, 6th floor, curtains always drawn. Inside, suspected courier routes, whispered networks, threads of something larger. For days, they rotated shifts. Long hours in crowded, on benches beneath flickering lamps, behind newspapers folded at precise angles. Listened more than she spoke, eyes catching details others missed. The same man circling the block twice, the van that parked each night but never unloaded, the faint glow of a television behind drawn curtains at exactly 2200 hours. Vega noticed too. You've done this before, she said one evening, her voice low as they sat in the noise of a market. Sipped her tea, gaze fixed forward. I watch closely, that's all. Vega studied her. Most people see, few watch, you watch. It wasn't praise, it was observation, the kind that recognized one ghost in another. On the 5th night it changed. Returned from his shift, eyes hard. Movement inside, 2 figures, transfer briefcases, timed with the van outside. Vega leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable. We don't engage, we observe. But felt something stir inside. The same pull that had driven her to carry without waiting, the urge to act. She steadied herself, silence, patience, not yet. They rotated again. Hours crawled. At dawn, the van left, the curtains closed, the city waking with clatter and smoke. Nothing recorded officially, yet everything mattered. Later, as they filed reports in a dim light peeling paint, a single fan humming overhead, Vega glanced its notes. Detailed, exact, more precise than, sharper even than her own. You don't write like a recruit, Vega said. Looked up, what do I write like? Vega's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, like someone who's been invisible longer than she's been seen. Said nothing, but the words lodged deep. The mission ended without gunfire, without headlines, without acknowledgement, which meant it was success. They returned stateside as if they'd never left. No parade, no welcome, just a silent debrief in a room that smelled of stale coffee. Williams was waiting. You did what was asked, he said. You blended, you saw, you carried the silence. Nodded once. But he wasn't finished. The operators reported your detail, precision beyond expectation, control under pressure. Vega said you don't just endure silence, you command it. His eyes locked on hers. That's rare, that's dangerous. Stood still, every muscle taut. Williams leaned forward. The next assignment won't be observation. It will be choice. And when it comes, remember this. The strongest voice isn't always the one that shouts. Sometimes it's the one that stays quiet until the moment matters. She left the debrief with her heart steady, her mind heavier. Back in the barracks, though they no longer felt like hers found her. Had graduated to another unit, yet she lingered, drawn by unfinished questions. You disappeared after graduation, said. No one knows where you went, and when you came back you looked the same, but you're not the same. Tied her boots with practice calm. We all change. Shook her head. Not like this, I know I was right, you're part of something else. Paused, meeting her gaze, and if I was. Froze, no denial this time, just the weight of an answer hidden in half a sentence. Stood, her voice low. Some things aren't meant to be understood, only respected. She walked away, leaving with silence that said more than truth ever could. That night sat alone, staring at her reflection in the small metal mirror above her bunk. She barely recognized the woman staring back, not because she looked different, but because she carried something deeper now. A silence that wasn't emptiness, a silence that was weight. The kind of silence that, sooner or later, demanded to be tested. Why was it always the quiet ones who were tested hardest? Because silence hides strength, and strength threatens those who rely on noise. The mission came without warning. No ceremony, no time to prepare. A name whispered in a secure room, a briefing delivered in fragments. Her team, Vega, and their task, shadow a meeting between suspected financiers in a neutral city. Watch, record, extract, nothing more. But nothing more never held. The city at night was a maze of glass and steel, neon spilling across wet pavement. The meeting took place in a warehouse, windows dark, guards posted outside. From their perch in a half-abandoned building across the street, the team watched through scopes and glass, ears pressed to radios that carried whispers of another language. Hours passed. The financiers arrived, briefcases exchanged, shadows moving, every detail logged. And then it shifted. A figure stumbled into the warehouse, bloodied, gagged, dragged by armed men. A hostage, unexpected, not part of the script. Cursed under his breath, Vega's jaw tightened. Orders are clear, she whispered. We don't intervene, we observe. So I stayed pressed to her scope, her heart pounding. The hostage struggled weakly, head lifting enough for the dim light to catch a face. Young, barely 20, terrified. Her breath caught. She remembered another face, another night, a memory buried deep but never gone, someone she hadn't saved, someone who haunted her silence. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. She whispered, if they kill him, we're complicit. Vega's eyes snapped to her. We don't break orders, that's how shadows survive. His voice was steady. Sometimes shadows need to move. The tension in the room thickened. The radio crackled with static, useless. No one higher was coming to make the decision. It fell to them. To her. Vega's stare was sharp, hard. You act now, you jeopardize all of us. met her gaze, calm, firm. If I don't act, I jeopardize myself. Silence, then usually mute, spoke a single word, choice. It was enough. Moved. Down the stairs, across wet streets, through shadows that bent around her. Vega and followed, not because they agreed, but because leaving her alone wasn't an option. They breached the warehouse silently, like ghosts slipping under doors. One guard dropped with a muffled strike, another with his blade. Vega's silenced pistol whispered once, twice. Reached the hostage, cutting the gag, loosening restraints. The young man's eyes widened with desperate gratitude. She whispered only one word, quiet. But silence couldn't last. The financiers shouted, guards scrambling. Gunfire erupted, sharp and deafening in the metal cavern. Vega returned fire, precise and ruthless, held the flank. Shielded the hostage, pulling him low, guiding him through chaos with calm steps, steady breath. Bullets tore air, sparks rained, bodies fell. And then one guard slipped behind, rifle raised, aiming straight at them. Turned, her body moving faster than thought. A single shot, clean, final. The guard crumpled. The silence after was heavier than the gunfire. They exfiltrated fast, blending back into the city's veins until the night swallowed them whole. Hours later, walls closing around them, Vega slammed her pistol onto the table. Her voice was fury wrapped in steel. You broke orders, you risked exposure, you risked everything. Met her eyes without flinching, and I saved him. Spoke again, voice low. She chose right. Vega glared, torn between anger and something else, respect she didn't want to give. Finally, she exhaled. You'll either make us legends or get us all killed. Williams arrived the next day, his expression unreadable, his tone measured. I've read the report, intervention against orders, compromised mission parameters, yet, he paused, studying her. No exposure, no loss of intel, one life saved. He leaned closer. Explain yourself. His voice was steady, soft. Orders matter, but so do lives. Sometimes silence isn't enough. Sometimes silence kills, and when that moment comes, you choose. I chose. William stared at her for a long time. Then slowly he nodded. You remind me why silence isn't given to everyone, only to those strong enough to carry it, and strong enough to break it when it matters. The words lingered, not approval, not condemnation, something heavier, recognition. When left the morning sun broke across the city. Crowds bustled, horns blared, life carried on unaware of the shadows moving among them. She walked alone, her steps steady, her breath calm. She had chosen, and in that choice she knew who she was, not the girl mocked at Fort Bradley, not the ghost hidden in files, but the soldier who carried weight others refused. Sometimes that weight was a sergeant, sometimes it was silence, sometimes it was a life pulled back from the edge. And sometimes it was the burden of knowing the world would never see, never understand, never applaud. But she didn't need applause, she didn't need noise. Because strength wasn't in the words shouted loudest. It was in the silence that acted when it mattered most.